Amy, great to see you. Thanks for making a bit of time. Thanks for coming out. I know it's down under, it's evening time for you, so I appreciate you, making a bit of extra time in the day to come and have a chat with me because what you're doing is really interesting. So I want to start with something that you said to me last time we spoke, which I thought was really interesting. You said to me, um, the thing I think a lot of people are worried about, and that you're worried about, is the dead internet theory. Now, I'd never heard of that. Tell me what you mean by that, and why does it matter?
Yeah, absolutely. So the dead internet theory is this idea that, as more and more people use AI and bots and they generate content using AI, that the internet will become a place that's like inherently untrustworthy and just filled with miscommunication and misinformation, or like more than it already currently is, I suppose. But nothing will be human generated.
Yeah.
And like if you think about it, like when AI can develop like a full scientific report, for example, with fake data and fake references and fake findings in like a matter of seconds, nothing means anything anymore. And like already we're seeing like social media as a primary news source for most people, right? But when we have users who are fake, when we have engagement, it's fake, and we can't tell that users are fake, and we can't tell that engagement is fake or followers are fake. And if we look at it through the lens of business, and specifically if we're operating online or if we're operating across countries like most of us are these days, how will we know if a company is real if their case studies could be AI? How will we know if they have a big following if it could all be fake? Like how will we know, well, how will we be able to do research or understand trends if it's all just synthetic? Like I think I was saying to you last time we spoke, I've had people literally accuse me on social media that, that my videos are AI, that I'm an AI. And like online, how do I prove that I'm not?
Yeah.
How will people ever be able to trust me enough to be able to buy from me? And like I know I sound like a bit of a doomsday gal when I see this, but I see this stuff happening. It's happening to me now. And I feel like it's a very scary future and it's already started.
Yeah. So tell me what that means specifically for your business. I mean, you tell us a little bit about your business. You have a particular kind of business. Why? And I mean, I can, because I know a bit about your business, I can see why this is a challenge for you. Just explain that to viewers that don't understand what you do, and why is this dead internet theory a bit of a threat in terms of your world?
Yeah, absolutely. So I run a virtual assistant agency. So essentially, I take staff from other countries. I train them up in systems, generally like marketing systems, executive assistant systems, designing systems, that kind of thing. And we place them in companies in the UK, in Canada, in America, in Australia, literally all over the world, which is fantastic for, just general globalization. But because literally all of the roles that I place are online, it like there's a very big threat of AI to just online jobs in general. But what value can they bring if we move into an area where everything is already fake? So if we have, let's say, a virtual assistant who is doing social media for someone, at what stage does it become so inauthentic and not work any longer because everything else out there is fake? At what stage does it even matter if you're on social media or anywhere else if people stop using it because it's all AI generated? So it's a risk not just to, my business in general, it's a risk to literally all business, and in particular a risk to countries like the Philippines, for example, where 20% of their economy is the gig economy.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, what you're really saying is that it undermines trust, doesn't it? And business is based on trust. I mean, that's the real point you're making, isn't it? And I think that's very
Yeah,
well made. Yeah. Let me ask
absolutely.
you. Let me ask you something that I forgot to ask you last time we spoke. I mean, why are you bothering? Why do you bother to be an entrepreneur? I mean, building a business is a tough gig. You're super bright, smart. You could earn loads of money doing lots of other things. In fact, there are loads of other things you could do with your life other than build a business. I mean, why? I mean, why are you building a business? What's important about that to you?
I think in particular with the business that I'm building at the moment, because So for it, like, I'll give you an actual example. So I feel an incredible level of responsibility to my team. So I've got over 100 staff in the Philippines, and every movement that I make personally has a really big impact on them because I'm not just supporting them, I'm supporting their family, I'm supporting their community at large. So every movement that I make is literally having such a big impact on someone else's life. And I feel like doing this business is going to have a much bigger impact on the world rather than me just making more money or doing something different. Does
So
that make sense?
what you're saying is you're building a business because you want to have an impact. I mean, what is that impact then?
Yeah, so literally our mission statement is to have or to become the Philippines' most empowered workforce. Now, I'm not based in the Philippines, but the majority of my staff are based in the Philippines, and it brings me so much joy and fulfillment to be able to provide, yeah, such a difference to people. Like, don't get me wrong, like we still want to make money. This is a business after all, but it is fantastic to be able to make a difference.
Sure, sure. And in terms of how you see your job as the CEO, I mean, how do you, I mean, you manage people all over the place. I mean, you've got clients all over the world, and you've got a bunch of people in a country that's few thousand, more than a few thousand miles away. I mean, how do you see the job of the CEO in the sense that you're purely essentially you're working with everyone remotely. I mean, how do you see that role? How do you create an environment in which people can participate, in which people feel welcomed and so on? I mean, tell us about how you see the CEO's job.
Yeah. I honestly I feel like I'm more of a facilitator nowadays than anything. It was so funny because I used to just work in operations, and the thing about me, Paul, is that I love systems. I stick me in a spreadsheet and I'm happy as a pig in mud. And then as I started kind of climbing the total totem pole in my last in like when I had a job, I realized that the higher I climbed up, the less it was about tactical skills and technicians, and it was more about the human side of things. So now when I became the CEO of LinkedVA, it's literally just about human movement and understanding people at its core. So I feel like the majority of what I do as a CEO is I'm doing communication, is I'm like facilitating communication between people, whether it's people in the Philippines, like any of my clients. I've got staff, like I said, I've got staff all over the world. So it's literally just communication. And not even just inside of my business, but all of the marketing that I do, all of the content that I do, all of the sales that I make, it literally just comes down to being able to talk to people.
Yeah. And is that a skill that you came to the business with, or is that something that you has developed as a CEO?
I certainly came in with a certain level of skill. I think you have to have a certain level of skill to be even able to get to this stage. But it is definitely something that I have grown every single year that I have been in the business. Only this year have I really started to appear more on podcasts, or like I've even started a podcast of my own. So there's always a new communication feather in your cap that you can apply when you're a CEO. But yeah, I've always kind of been on stages or speaking or something like that, but it's a very different style of communication when you're speaking one to many versus one to one.
And
Mm.
in terms of that development, I mean, one of the things that's interesting about business at the moment is that the rate of change is just
Hmm.
so fast. I mean, AI, of course, is making that happen. Things are happening really fast, partly because of AI. But compared to when I started in business, which I don't know, 40 years ago, whatever it was, I mean, the world is changing so fast, which means that as the CEO, I mean, one of the challenges is keeping up with all that stuff that's going on.
Oh,
And
it's
making sure
ridiculous.
that you've got the right skills and competencies to deal with the next challenge. I mean, give us your take on that kind of professional development piece. I mean, how do you keep up with the amount of change that's going on?
It is a constant job. I'm not gonna lie. Literally every week, every month, I we will host a webinar for our staff, literally just on changes that are happening in platforms, in AI, or anything like that, just so we can try to, as a workforce, keep up with how quickly things are moving. I have people that are literally just there to research. We've got this one channel in our like our version of Slack on in the company that is just for AI news. And every single day something is being updated in there so that we can try and keep up as a company. Because it is, yeah, it is absolutely constant. And it was funny, I was thinking about it a while ago. I feel like 20 years ago, inside of a company, to be a salesperson was the most impressive part of a company. Like sales was king when it came to growing a company. And then I'd say, like, even 40 years ago, product was king and delivery was king and just having the best quality stuff. And now I feel like it's marketing. Marketing is king. So if you want to have a successful business nowadays, it's marketing, it's eyeballs.
Yeah, and those are external things, reacting to the way technology changes. What about you as an individual in terms of your strengths and weaknesses as a leader? How do you? I mean, the kind of conventional wisdom is, you focus on your strengths. I mean,
Mhm.
how do you manage your own internal growth and development? Because it seems to me that one of the other things about being a sales, you have to react. Stuff kind of just lands on you all the time, doesn't it? When I had a proper job, I mean, often would struggle to find time to reflect on my own performance and the things that I was doing well and maybe not doing well or wanted to change. How do you manage that sort of thing in your situation?
Well, there's a few different aspects to it. So one of the key foundational aspects that we have at LinkedVA is you've got to be hot, which means honest, open, and transparent. You can be as good looking as you like, but it means that we have a really strong feedback loop with each other. So all of the time we have systems in place where we're constantly communicating to each other. What are we doing well? What needs to be improved? What opportunities are we missing out on? And I have a meeting about that literally every week because, if it's not in your calendar, it's not going to happen. And as a CEO, you can get so busy dealing with, the multiple fires that come up every single day. But at the end of the day, if you're not putting aside time to work on your business, you're going to get stuck in your business.
Yeah.
And we have a saying at LinkedVA is that you can't read the label from inside the jar. So if we want to be able to know what's going on, we need to be able to step away.
Yeah, no, that is very insightful, actually. And in terms of I mean, building a business is it's a roller coaster, isn't it? I mean, there are good days and there are days that aren't so good. And I mean, what is it in particular that motivates you to kind of get out of bed every day and put the time and energy and effort into business building? Because it's not it's a tough gig building a global business.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
motivates you? What is it?
To be honest, it's fun. I think a lot of different jobs just in the world in general are they're very repetitive. So you see the same things and you do the same things all the time. I love how much change there is in business. I'm someone who just absolutely adores change to the chagrin of my staff a lot of the time because it turns out not everyone loves change as much as I do. In fact, most of the communication I have is about change management and easing people into a changing environment. But I think if you love change and you're always looking for opportunities to become a different version of yourself to completely change the company, business is a great place for you. And especially in an industry like mine where it's literally changing day to day, works perfectly.
Yeah, and that change piece. I mean, that's I always think that's a really interesting area. How do you? I mean, given that it's so constant, I mean, how do you, in terms of specifically around change management, how
Mhm.
do you manage that in a remote environment? I mean, you've got people all
Yeah.
over the place, haven't you? Clients and
Yeah.
staff. How do you
Yeah.
manage? Managing change is easier, I think, if you're all in the same office. You can get people together, you can sit down, you can talk about it. A bit more complicated when you've got people all over the place using all sorts of different tech.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that you say that it's more complicated. I actually find it easier
Right.
because I feel like because I have people in the office that I work at as well, but I find it so much easier because when you are operating a like mostly online business, you have to have really strong structures and meeting structures in place with your staff to be able to communicate really effectively. And because our structures are so set, it becomes really easy. It's almost like there is an algorithm to every kind of meeting, an algorithm to every kind of communication that you have. Whereas if it's in person, sometimes you'd think that it'd be easier to be understood, but it isn't always because you aren't following the same structure of conversation that you would have face to face. It's a little bit more fluid, it's a little bit more casual, it's a little bit more flexible. And I think people can feel really under pressure sometimes when you're meeting face to face to react a certain way. But online, they've almost got a filter between you and them. So they have a little bit more almost privacy or ability to think through what you're saying. So when it comes to something like change management, we have such a formula in place for the kinds of conversations. So it starts with, this is the problem that we're experiencing, and really buy everyone into the problem as to how it's affecting the business. This is the research that we've done. These are some options that we've been looking at. This is the option that we're deciding that we're going to take, and really try and get everyone to buy in at that stage. Has anyone got any questions about our thought process there so far? No, yes, whatever. And then we'll start rolling out how the change is going to happen. So, literally, what the timeline looks like, how it's going to impact people individually, and what is expected of them. So, if you've got all of these factors involved, and people recognize what's going to happen, because I think the reason change is so scary for a lot of people is because it creates this environment that is it's volatile, it's like ambiguous. There's actually a framework for that too, I think. But when they can see something that is steady, and even if it is just your communication or it is just the fact that you have a plan, they immediately feel safer, even if they're not sure what it's going to look like on the other side.
Reassuring is what you're saying. It's about reassuring.
Yeah, super reassuring.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting your earlier point there. I mean, I think life is just messy. I mean, it's just messy sometimes. It just never goes the way you kind of would like it to go. It never goes fast enough either. That's the other thing I've found in business. But it's an interesting point you make there about reassuring people. I think there's a lot of
Mm.
truth to that. Let me ask you about the impact of change. So, one of the things that I think business teaches people, if you like, is resilience.
Mhm.
Because you have so many ups and downs, because so many things go wrong, because you're constantly dealing with new problems, unexpected problems, people doing daft things, and so on. I mean, how do you build your own resilience and protect your own well-being? And also, how do you build resilience in your people and protect their well-being? I mean, what's your take on those sort of issues?
Yeah. For me, it is just messing up again and again. I feel like I am unfortunately the kind of person who doesn't necessarily learn from absorbing information from other people. I'm the kind of person who learns from, let's just figure it out. And I feel like the most common phrase out of my mouth is, well, we're not going to know until we try it. Like, we can read every single book under the sun, but
Yeah.
until we figure out if this is going to work inside of our business, we're not going to know. And I feel like, when the CEO is coming in with that attitude, and the attitude of, like, what I say, so, and literally said this on a staff meeting today, is a problem that we know about is a problem half solved. And that's the attitude that we're bringing. So if we're talking about problems, we see them as a positive thing in the company, because it means that it's half solved. A problem we don't know about is a much bigger issue. So if we're seeing problems, if we're communicating problems, everyone's happy because of my reaction. So I'm not bringing a negative reaction when things are going wrong. I'm saying, fantastic, we've found another problem. How are we going to solve this one? And that mindset will translate over into your staff, and then they'll start parroting it as well, which I love to see. When any of my leaders start saying phrases that I say all the time, or having the kinds of reactions that I have, it makes me really happy, because it means the staff are going to feel safer, but it also means they're going to be far more likely to bring problems up.
Mm. I mean, what you're really saying, so I understood this correctly, is that kind of problem solving is part of your culture. It's a
Yeah,
norm. It's a norm. It's part of
absolutely.
what you do. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a positive. Like, in general, problems are a positive. It's a really weird way to think about it, but it works.
Yeah. It's cliche somebody once said to me, problems are our friends, which sounds dead odd, but I mean, it sums it up,
True.
really,
It's so
doesn't it?
true.
Yeah. 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 Let me ask you about the kind of broader business building process. So, business building is hard. We've talked about that.
Mhm.
Business building is quite complicated. It's not there's so many moving parts, if you like. We also do it now in an environment where we are, if you like, under the spotlight, in the sense of we're building in what you might describe as the social media age. I mean, any
Mhm.
one of your staff, any one of your clients could go to social media and start talking about what you're doing. example, in a good way or a bad way, potentially. How do you feel and how do you think about that process of business building in an environment where, if you've got a lot of dissatisfaction or anger or frustration or irritation, that can be exposed publicly really quickly, which probably wasn't the case 20 or 30 years ago. I mean, what's your take on that issue?
I mean, the first point of call is always just treat everyone kindly and have integrity, do what you say you're going to do, and that's going to get rid of, most of your issues. I feel like, and like I'm not immune to them. We obviously still do have problems, especially in a business like mine where it's entirely human based. So, I've got so many clients, I've got so many staff, like there are always going to be problems. It's not this flawless system. But if you treat people as kindly as you can and do what you say you're going to do, it lessens the risk. Of course, there are always going to be unhappy people, but you just kind of have to take the good with the bad sometimes. I remember I made this video once on social media and I was literally talking about a phenomenon that we've studied, which is that people are going to be 7 times more likely to leave a bad review than a good review,
Yeah.
just because, people feel more passionately when they're upset about something and they're going to be more likely to do that. And I made this video and I put it on social media about that, and it wasn't even after I'd received a bad review. And then I got a whole bunch of comments on that video saying, "Oh no, poor business owners, all the rich are struggling," and like everyone was making fun of me on it. And I was just like, "Oh, look, you're never going to please everyone, right? I could lay down for everyone and they'd still complain that I'm not flat enough." And at the end of the day, if I look at the people who are complaining about the business that I know is running like morally, they're not people I'd want to work with anyway. So even if they're, ex-staff who complain about things, they're not someone I want on my team. If they're like just people on social media, they're not necessarily people who are going to be clients of mine because they've completely misunderstood and honestly, they're keyboard warriors. Like I don't need that energy around me. So I'm not upset if I piss off people who are never going to buy from me or never going to work for me because like what is the point? Like I'm not for everyone and that's okay. And I think when it comes to marketing, especially if you have to do a lot of content creation in your business, like most people do nowadays to be able to get noticed, as I said before, you've got to take the good with the bad. And if you are going to be magnetizing, you are going to be polarizing.
Yeah. And what about, I mean, I completely agree with what you've just said. What about the kind of reputational risk with clients? I mean,
Hmm.
it's fine to have an ex-member of staff or disgruntled member of staff moaning about something. I get that. Or, somebody that just doesn't like what you do. And you get that occasionally. What about the impact that they might have not on you, but on your clients? I mean, does that worry you, the kind of reputational risk stuff? And if it does, how do you manage it?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we've definitely had situations in the past where, like if an ex-staff member has lied about something or they've gone around our back to a client or even a client has done something shady and they've tried to, I don't know, do whatever. And then they've spoken badly about us. It's just something that you take in stride. I think once you get to a certain level in business, you've just got to let it go, otherwise it'll start drowning you.
Yeah.
People are going to say bad things, and there's really not much that I can do about it. As long as I know that I'm doing the just thing and I'm doing the right thing by people, that's going to keep me warm at night.
Yeah, sure. And while we're talking about relationship building, I mean, business is about trust. Business is also about relationships, isn't it? I mean, one of the interesting things I think about building relationships with both clients and with staff is the balance between building a nice, cozy, trusting, friendly relationship, if you like, the fluffy stuff, and the outcomes that need to be achieved, i.e., the
Yeah.
client wants you to do this, or you need the staff to do that. I mean, I always think that that's a tricky relationship to manage because you need both. You need a good relationship with them, but you also need to get stuff done, don't you? And what's your take on managing that kind of sort of messy balance involved? I mean, just
Yeah.
talk about that.
You raised something that is honestly one of the things that I talk to the most with my leaders about is trying to manage the balance between performance and culture. Because obviously you need culture, otherwise people are going to leave and they're going to perform poorly. And you need performance, otherwise you're not going to have a job because nothing's actually getting done and clients are unhappy. And the thing that I've noticed is that there are certain personality types that are going to naturally be able to do it, and there are certain personality types that are not naturally going to be able to do it. And it's not that we'll work with one personality type and not the other, it's that we have to manage them a little bit differently. And again, because communication when you're working virtually becomes very formulaic, it actually does become a little bit easier.
Mm.
So on a meeting, for example, when we have an agenda, we'll have an agenda to a meeting, but it always starts off with relationship building or like rapport building, like a normal sales call would start that way. So we're asking each other, how what happened on the weekend? Let me share something about myself. And when I have to try and get information out of someone that might be a little bit more difficult, I'll start by being vulnerable myself so that they feel like it's a safe space for them to do it as well. So that kind of like deals with the culture aspect. From the performance aspect, it comes down to a few key things. Like the first one is you have to be so clear when
Mm.
when a situation is ambiguous, like I was saying before, like 90% of people will fail. And I think about, sometimes I've had clients who've come on with me and they don't know what they want to achieve or what they want from people. And they'll try and hire someone and say the same shit around them. And their staff will just not perform, right? And that's because there are no clear expectations and no clear direction. So if you've got to have clear expectations, you've got to have clear direction, and then you've got to have follow up on the other side of it, which is where you hold them accountable, which means you're checking back in on the KPIs, you're checking back in on the goals. And if they're not hitting it, you're saying, okay, you didn't hit this. Why didn't you hit this? And if you are hitting it, you're saying, well done for hitting this thing. And because our communication is so formulaic like that, it means that not a lot of things are going to fall through the cracks, right? Like if we picture it like a net, we just try and keep the communication woven as closely as we can so that we're hitting both things. It is still a delicate balancing act sometimes. Like not all personalities are going to react well to, feedback that they might see as critical or negative, but it really just depends on how you're delivering this information. And if you're following the strict formulas that we have in place for that kind of communication, it tends to go a lot easier.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, systematizing it is what you're saying. And what about getting the right people on the bus in the first place?
Mhm.
I always think that's a challenge, finding the right people. I mean, I've got it wrong on numerous occasions. I mean, I've got it right quite a few times, but I've got it wrong on
Yep.
probably more occasions than I would like. That is a tricky process. I mean, how do you feel about the process of getting the right people? And what do you look for in the people that you bring on the bus?
There are a few different things that we look for. So, I mean, because at our heart, we are a recruitment agency, so we do a lot of recruitment. And there are all the obvious tests that we take people through. We give them what I call the common sense test, which is just can you understand basic instructions and follow through with them? We do English testing, we do like things like that. We put people through normally like a minimum of 3 days worth of training before we'll actually hire them to make sure that they have the right skill sets, that everything on their resume is, they can do exactly what they've said that they can do. But more than that, it's attitude markers. So primarily the thing that we look for the most is are they coachable? Do they have a growth mindset? Because I'm a very firm believer of you can teach skills, but you can't teach attitude. So if we're looking for someone who has the right attitude, who is going to be the right culture fit for us, it is so much easier to be able to train people up in skills that they might not necessarily have, as long as they are someone who is open to feedback, that they have a growth mindset, and that they can move from receiving feedback, learning something new, and implementing it. That's like with anyone I hire, that's the main thing. So like especially for my headquarter staff, so the staff that the bigger players, we have this thing on every Thursday. I had it earlier today. We call game tape review. And every single week, one of us has to bring along a video of a call that they've had with a client or a prospect or something like that. And we will sit and we will play it in front of the entire headquarter team, and we will all review it. We will all give feedback on it
Wow.
directly to the person. And that is something that can be just so confronting for people if they haven't received feedback like that and they're just kind of put on blast. So that is something that when I'm interviewing people, I will tell them that that is what they do, and their reaction to that tells me so much about them, everything that I need to know. If it makes them uncomfortable, I tend not to hire them. If they're like, "Oh, yeah, no, that sounds like a really good idea," or, "Oh, no, that sounds fantastic. I've never received feedback in my last role," or something like that, then I'm going to be far more likely to hire them. So, how do they react to feedback?
It's a very interesting point, that, isn't it? Because partly it's about selecting the people that are open to that, and I follow that logic entirely. It also creates a way for you to accelerate the growth of your staff, though, doesn't it? If people get regular feedback in a form that enables them to develop and change and improve and all the rest
Mhm.
of it, that just accelerates the whole business, doesn't it? I mean, it's part of what
Oh,
makes businesses
much.
grow.
Yeah, so much. And it's not even just receiving feedback yourself, it's being able to give it to other people because that is what we instill in all of our staff. And if we're attacking it from both angles literally every week, then everyone's accelerating. We created a GP, like when GPTs first came out and you could create your own. The one that I created that I'm honestly most proud of was a sales coach. So what we do is we take every sales call that we have, we take the transcript and we run it through a GPT. And the GPT is designed to be able to spit out a report that says how well the salesperson did. Like, how well did they follow the script? How well did they overcome objections? How well did they build rapport? How, you know what I mean? And it gives them feedback based on that. And it's one of my favorite ways of using AI to be able to improve people because I can't review every single sales call that happens. I don't have that kind of time. And like I might be reviewing one a week with them on our game tape review, but it's not helpful enough. Do you know what I mean? Like I would love for people to be able to receive immediate feedback on things so that they can constantly improve. So if they're on a sales call now and I can give them feedback on how well they went within an hour, then they almost know better how to either set themselves up for the next call and understand where they've gone wrong, or if they have a follow-up call with that person, they know, okay, well, I missed steps, 3C and 2A. I need to make sure I hammer them on that the next time I'm on a call. So I've just really, like, I'm using AI at the moment to really accelerate that feedback piece because, yeah, it's integral inside of our business. Like, we would not be where we were, like where we are now, if we didn't have that feedback piece.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's refreshing to hear AI being used in such a positive way, actually.
I know.
That will really enhance human performance, won't it?
Yeah.
Because the big threat that everyone's worried about AI is that it takes jobs away from people. I mean, what you're saying, you can use it to improve people's performance, which I think is great. Let me ask you about, we've talked a lot about business building. Let me ask you about customers. I mean, what does a good customer look like to you?
Oh my gosh. A good customer to me is someone that doesn't question our process. I think the most frustrating thing to me is like I've got a lot of clients who are recruiters themselves, not a virtual assistants, but just like local recruiters. And the most frustrating thing about recruiters is that they think that they understand recruitment so that they will question absolutely everything that you're doing. And it's really hard to explain to someone who is an expert that they don't know what they're talking about when it comes to virtual hires, when it comes to hiring across culture, when it comes to just communicating with someone online or setting someone up to succeed. Because what a lot of recruiters will do is they're really good at the front end. They know how to get people in the door, but they don't know how to manage them on the other side of things. And a lot of the time is you need to set up, like what I was talking about before, you need to set up this mindset and this framework in the recruitment system to be able to have success 3, 6 months down the track. But because recruiters don't tend to think long term like that, they're just trying to place candidates as quickly as they can. It's just a very different process. So when clients complain about, oh, I don't really want to do that. Oh, that sounds like too much effort. I'm like, trust me, a little bit of effort now is going to pay dividends in the long term. So please just trust our process because it has worked for literally hundreds of clients. And we know that staff are going to have an easier time if you follow our process, and you are going to have an easier time following our process. And at the end of the day, we want success for you. We want this virtual assistant to be able to hit goals for you. So that's what needs to happen.
Hmm. I was talking to I mean, I was talking to another Aussie the other day, actually, who she was saying that one of the things that's made her business successful is that she regularly fires clients. I mean,
Yep.
what's your take on that? I mean, where you have customers that aren't, that you think, oh God, they're not going to be a good customer. I mean, are you fairly okay, you're not for us? I mean, what's your take on?
Yeah. There are definitely cases where I have had to fire clients before. Like I have had really painful instances where I've had to fire really like well-paying clients.
Mm.
But if I've got an instance where, let's say I've got one client and they're just churning through virtual assistants, I will kind of look at that situation and say, well, listen, there's a common denominator here, and I know it's not the virtual assistants, it's this client. So I'm comparing all the feedback. And at this stage, like if they're churning through VAs, that means I'm churning through staff, and staff are not cheap to get. I invest so much time and money into getting staff, um, and it does damage culture when you've got a big staff or like a staff retention problem like that. So I am perfectly happy to fire a client if it is going to save the rest of my business, because a bad client will literally just
Yeah.
ruin things on levels that you don't even know about. And it's not just your staff who have to directly like talk to them. It's the staff that the staff talk to and the staff that those staff talk to. Like it's just like a poisoned apple.
Yeah, no, I agree with you about that. And your point about it damaging the culture, pretty important that because culture's really, I mean, it's absolutely critical, isn't it? As you were saying earlier on. Let me ask you a bit about the markets that you're in. I mean, you're all over the shop, really. I mean, doing business in LA very different from doing business in Adelaide. I mean, what's your take on those kind of cultural nuances? The different way people like to do, clients I'm talking about from different parts of the world, their
Yeah.
approaches. I mean, how do you think about that, see that? What sort of impact does that have on you?
Clients, it's funny. Like I do actually see more of a difference between industries rather than countries.
Right.
So if
Okay.
you're talking to someone who has an IT background, they're much more similar from country to country versus like a coach, for example. That it's a completely different kind of person, a completely different kind of mindset. So the biggest struggle I would say is when you're dealing across industries rather than dealing across countries. For the most part, I would say like we live in a fairly globalized world. Like I feel like the invention of the internet made us very globalized.
Yeah.
It made, like I think we spoke about last time, made supply chains possible and easier. But it also means that like, communication becomes a little bit easier because we understand each other on a very different level now than we might have done, say, even 20 years ago. So as long as you are like my principle is like as long as you are going to be someone who is just kind, you're curious, you're respectful, you're going to be able to communicate across cultures.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think your point, that's a well-made point about being respectful, actually, because respect is something that's valued everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
disrespect is something that upsets people everywhere, I think. Um,
Yes.
I mean, I'm just thinking about Donald Trump telling Europe that it's in decay, and that's gone down really well with people, I'm sure. Sorry, I don't want to end up talking about Donald Trump. Tell me about your experiences. I mean, when you look back on the journey that you've been on, I mean, it sounds pretty exciting, actually. The things that you've been doing, both in this business and before. I mean, when you look back, what would you say are the big things that you've learned from your journey?
Oh, I feel like I'm learning every single day, to be honest. I
Mm.
feel like if I was to pick a theme, it would be that everything is solvable. Even if it seems really complicated at the offset, everything is solvable. You just have to have the willpower and the resources to be able to manage it. And so when you know that everything is solvable, it just becomes more of a fiscal or a logical decision about whether we want to solve this or not. So I think that's probably the attitude that has really helped me in a lot of cases is that is this is this problem worth the solution that we're going to invest into it?
Mm.
And because I'm assuming that absolutely everything has a solution. It's not like, oh, this is just too hard basket. Let's not deal with it.
So, so,
Literally
so,
every
so it's what you're saying is we know we can solve this. The question is that the priority to focus on? That's what you're saying, is
Yeah,
that we know we can do it,
exactly.
and that's a mindset issue as much as anything, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And where does that mindset come from in terms of you?
Oh God, I don't know. Maybe I was born with it. I actually have no idea. I think maybe just being greeted with, like, I was a very independent child. I had like a lot of younger siblings that I had to look after from a young age. So a lot of the time I was left to my own devices or given a lot of responsibility. And I didn't necessarily have someone that I could always rely on for that because, my parents were busy. They were both working and I had a lot of children to look after. So I think that just makes you very proactive and
Yeah,
resourceful to be able to do what you can with what you have.
yeah, yeah. And in terms, if you were to go back to the beginning, right? Is there anything that you would do differently on the back of what you've learned from the journey? I mean, if you were starting out again, if
Mm.
you were, 20 years younger or whatever, I mean, what would you, is there anything you'd do differently given what you know?
Yeah, nearly everything. I feel like I do nearly everything differently. I think the biggest mistakes that I've ever made inside of business are almost being too kind. Like, and I know that sounds really weird, but when you give people the benefit of the doubt to an extreme degree. So if I really liked someone that was inside of my business, but I could just see they weren't a fit, right? They might not have been a fit for the culture. They might not have been a fit for the skill set, but I liked them. So I kept them around. And I feel like I've had that problem so much earlier in my career. And I feel like I would be so much further ahead if I'd have learned that lesson a lot earlier. But, I've learned it now, which is the main thing. But yeah, I think looking at situations like that, it it makes you a little bit tougher, and you have to be tougher when it comes to protecting not just your company, but the employees and the clients that you've got inside of the company. Because yeah, like I said, one bad person can ruin everything. And doesn't matter how much you like them as a human being, they just might not be a good fit.
Yeah, no, and I certainly experienced the same thing and have made the same mistakes myself. But is there any particular bits of advice that you've had along the way that have really helped you?
I have always really surrounded myself by a lot of mentors. So a lot of coaches, a lot of even my peers. So I'll always do everything I can to learn from them and take what they're saying in. I think, oh gosh, I can't even pinpoint one particular thing that has helped me, but I would say the one that gets drilled into me over and over again is you need to take a step back.
Mm,
Sometimes I think we get so invested in the hustle and in moving as quickly as we can and in doing as much as we can so that we feel really productive. But when you're looking at change and when you're looking at becoming a better version of yourself, you need quiet and you need space. And I think a lot of the time as CEOs, we don't give ourselves quiet and we don't give ourselves space because we want to be seen as productive by our staff or even by ourselves. But without time and space, you're not doing any thinking about your business. You're not thinking strategically. So, and this is still a lesson I'm learning even to this day, is you need to stop sometimes so that you can look at the business holistically or, even the marketplace holistically and really decide where you want to go next.
mm. I mean, that creating space for reflection. I mean, that's a lesson that I've had to learn. I learned it fairly young, fortunately,
Oh,
but
it's good.
you're absolutely right. I mean, making space to spend a bit of time reflecting on what's happened and what you want to do next. I mean, as I've got better at that, I mean, I could definitely see that it's helped me not make quite as many stupid mistakes as I did in the past. So I think that's a pretty wise bit of sort of wise piece of advice there. Let me ask you something that is not really to do with your business, but it is to do with something that's relevant to your business. One of the things that's happening, we touched on this earlier on, one of the things that's happening is that the AI is accelerating change. I
Mhm.
mean, happening every sector, every industry, as far as I can see. What's your take on the way AI is going to shake down in your world? I mean, how do you see the future in relation to the impact that AI might have on you? What sort of things is it going to change? I mean, just give us a sense of how you see the environment that you're operating in being impacted by that over the next year or two. I mean, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, this is actually an argument that I have with so many people because I honestly think people are very naive to what AI is. And I think, especially when it was first coming out, there was a lot of that narrative around, I don't know, you probably heard it as well. There was a lot of comparison about, oh, but when tractors came into being and farmers lost their jobs, and so they were, not tilling the soil, or I don't know, I'm not a farmer. They had to learn to drive the tractors instead, and we've got to treat AI like that. But AI isn't a tool, and I think people get confused and they think it's a tool. It's more like a baby god, right? A tractor is something that has limited functions. AI doesn't have limited functions. We can absolutely use it in a really positive way. We can use it to be better. We can use it to be faster, but it has a lot of unintended consequences.
Just give
And
us
I
an
think
example. Just give us an example of what sort of things do you mean? I mean, just explain that a bit.
like the unintended consequences,
Yeah.
oh, there are so many. So if I was talking about, I'm not sure how much you might have been aware, but like there have been a lot of suicides of children because of the communications they're having
I've
with
read some of the
AI.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There are people who go into AI psychosis because an AI makes them believe that they are a person. And because an AI inherently wants to be helpful to you and it wants to be used, that's how it's designed. It makes people really reliant on it. So no longer are we going after human connections anymore. We're relying on AI. And because AI is accessible to everyone, which I absolutely think it should be accessible to everyone, not just the elite, but it means that people have bad intentions as well as good intentions. So, not my mother, but another mother, the other day received a call from her child who was crying and saying that they'd been kidnapped. It was an AI because the wrong person just sort of like got a hold of their child's voice like from I don't know, probably social media or something like that. And so that's kind of what scams look like now is
Yeah.
AIs being able to fake things like that. And I think that's so terrifying. And like that's an extreme version, but it's also only the start. And AI is still in its infancy at the moment, but where is it going to go?
Mm.
How much bigger is it going to be? And if I look at our industry in particular, if every job that can be done online goes to an AI, what does the economy look like? Right? If we place them into robots as Elon Musk is looking at doing, like there goes the rest of the jobs.
Yeah. It's
And I
great for
know,
Elon Musk.
yeah, exactly. And like I know that I sound like a little bit of a mad conspiracy theorist here, but in the industry that I'm in, I see it already. I see so much job loss. So it is going to have a massive impact. And I think a lot of people ask me this question because they think that virtual assistants are going to be the first things to go. But by the time that virtual assistants are going to be defunct, so are online jobs in general. So it is a much bigger issue. I can see it happening because of the industry I'm in, but I'm not necessarily going to be the first one affected.
Mm. And what are your thoughts? I mean, I know you're not a politician or a regulator, but what are your thoughts on what we do about that kind of thing? I mean, you're not the first person I've heard those kind of stories from. I mean, I mean, it is pretty worrying, I think. I mean, what do you think we should do about that?
Um, it's hard. Yeah, it is hard to know. I think regulation certainly does
Mm.
play a part in it. And like there are a lot of cases of, governments might be overstepping their control. Like there's a big conversation in Australia at the moment because we literally just today or yesterday we've banned social media for under
Yeah,
16s.
yeah, I saw that.
And there is a massive divide in our country about it. But at some stage, you do want a government to step in and to protect you from an evil, so to speak, because I think a lot of the companies that are running AIs or that are running social media, they don't really give a shit if they're doing something that is going to impact society because at the end of the day, they care about their profits and their bottom lines. They're a company. They're not for the people. They're for shareholders. They're for the
Mm.
profits.
Mm.
So someone has to be for the people. And I think a lot of the people themselves don't necessarily have the power. They don't necessarily have the connections themselves. So we are relying on our governments to be able to step in and do something about it. I'm not saying that there's an easy way. I don't think it's possible at this stage to wind back AI from where it's at right now. But like it needs something. It needs like some kind of guardrails before it gets too out of hand. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. You can never go backwards. You can only go forwards. Although I do think your point about relying on governments to look after you is also kind of worrying as well, really. I mean,
I know, I know.
but perhaps that's just our government in the UK. Maybe that you're not so
I
worried.
think I think that's just all governments, to be honest.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah. It's
yeah.
kind of pretty worrying, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Amy, thank you for taking a bit of time to come and talk us through what you're doing. Absolutely fascinating, really, really interesting, and I think some real wisdom in there as well that I think people will find really helpful and really useful. So thank you for making the time to come and have a chat with us.
Awesome. And thanks for hosting me, Paul. You're such a great interviewer.
That's the right answer. See you soon, Amy. Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye bye.